The elephant's scream pierced the night, a sound I would never forget. It was the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. My name is Kamathi, and I'm a park ranger in the heart of Africa. I've lived here all my life, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw that night. It was a warm evening in June. The sun had just set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I was doing my usual rounds in the national park, making sure all was well with the animals we protected. As I drove my old jeep along the dusty path, I heard a noise that made my blood run cold. It was an elephant, but not the usual trumpeting sound they make. This was different. It was a scream of pain and fear. I quickly turned off the engine and listened. The sound came again, louder this time. It was coming from the east, near the river. Without thinking, I grabbed my flashlight and radio and set off on foot. The grass was tall, reaching up to my chest in some places. I moved as fast as I could, pushing through the thick vegetation. The elephant's cries grew louder as I got closer. When I finally reached the clearing by the river, what I saw made me stop in my tracks. There, in the moonlight, was a large bull elephant. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The elephant was on its side, struggling to get up. As I moved closer, I saw why. Its tusks were gone, and where they should have been, there were only bloody holes. My heart raced as I realized what had happened. Poachers. They had come in the night and taken the elephant's tusks while it was still alive. I radioed for help, my voice shaking as I reported what I had found. As I waited for backup to arrive, I stayed with the elephant, talking to it softly, trying to calm it down. But I knew it was too late. The elephant's breathing was getting weaker. By the time help arrived, the elephant had died. I stood there, feeling helpless and angry. How could anyone do this? And for what? A piece of ivory to be sold on the black market. That night changed everything for me. I knew I couldn't just stand by and let this keep happening. I had to do something. And that's when I made a decision that would take me across Africa, facing dangers I never imagined. The next morning, I went to see my boss, Mr. Ose. He was a tall, thin man with graying hair and kind eyes. When I told him what I'd seen, he shook his head sadly. Kamathi, he said, this is not the first time this has happened. The poachers are getting bolder. They don't care about our laws or the animals they hurt. But what can we do? I asked. We can't be everywhere at once. Mr. Ose looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that would change my life. There might be a way to stop this, but it's dangerous. Are you willing to take that risk? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. Whatever it takes. Mr. Ose nodded and pulled out a map. He pointed to a city far to the north. We believe the poachers are taking the ivory here. If we can find out who's buying it, we might be able to stop the killing. I looked at the map. The city was hundreds of miles away, across deserts and mountains. It would be a long, hard journey. But I knew I had to do it. When do I leave? I asked. Tomorrow, Mr. Ose said. But Kamathi, you must be careful. These people are dangerous. They won't hesitate to hurt you if they find out what you're doing. I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. This was my chance to make a difference, to save the elephants I had sworn to protect. The next morning, I set out on my journey. I had a backpack with some clothes, food, and water. In my pocket was a small carving of an elephant tusk. It wasn't real ivory, of course, but it looked real enough to fool someone who didn't look too closely. This would be my way in. The first part of my journey was through the savanna. I walked for days, sleeping under the stars at night. I saw herds of zebras and gazelles and, once, in the distance, a pride of lions. But I kept moving, always heading north. After a week, I reached the edge of the desert. The terrain changed dramatically. Instead of grass and trees, there was only sand as far as the eye could see. The heat was intense, and I had to be careful with my water. It was in the desert that I met Hassan. He was a trader, traveling with a small caravan of camels. When he saw me walking alone, he stopped and offered me a ride. "It's dangerous to travel alone in the desert," he said. "Come, join us." I was grateful for the help but also wary. I didn't know if I could trust Hassan. But I didn't have much choice. My water was running low, and I knew I wouldn't make it across the desert on my own. As we traveled, Hassan and I talked. He was curious about why I was heading north. I told him I wanted to sell something valuable, showing him the fake ivory tusk. Hassan's eyes widened when he saw it. "Be careful with that," he whispered. "There are many who would kill for such a thing." His words sent a chill down my spine. I was getting closer to the dangerous world I was trying to infiltrate. After several days of traveling through the desert, we finally reached an oasis. It was like a miracle. In the middle of all that sand, a small lake surrounded by palm trees. As we set up camp for the night, Hassan pulled me aside. "Kamathi," he said, "I think I know why you're really here." My heart skipped a beat. Had I given myself away? But Hassan's next words surprised me. "You're trying to stop the ivory trade, aren't you?" I didn't know what to say. Should I deny it? But something in Hassan's eyes made me trust him. "Yes," I admitted. "How did you know?" Hassan smiled sadly. "I've seen many people come through here with the same look in their eyes. Determined, but also scared. Most of them never come back." His words made me realize just how dangerous my mission was. But I couldn't turn back now. "Can you help me?" I asked. Hassan thought for a moment, then nodded. "I can get you into the city," he said. "But after that, you're on your own. And Kamathi, be careful. The people behind this, they are not just poachers. They are powerful and ruthless." The next day, we set out for the city. As we got closer, I could see it rising out of the desert like a mirage. Tall buildings of glass and steel were so different from the world I knew. Hassan left me at the city gates. "Good luck," he said. "And remember, trust no one." With those words ringing in my ears, I entered the city. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Cars were everywhere, people were rushing about, and there was noise and smells that were completely new to me. I found a small hotel and checked in. That night, I lay awake, thinking about my next move. How was I going to find the people buying the ivory? The next morning, I set out to explore the city. I kept my eyes open for any signs of ivory, shops selling carved figurines and jewelry stores with ivory pieces, but everything I saw seemed to be fake or made from other materials. It was on my third day in the city that I got my first real lead. I overheard two men talking in a cafe. They were speaking in low voices, but I caught the words shipment and tusks. My heart raced. This could be it? I waited until the men left, then followed them at a distance. They led me to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I watched the warehouse for 2 days. Men came and went, always looking around nervously. I knew I had found what I was looking for. But how was I going to get proof? On the third night, I decided to take a risk. I waited until it was dark, then snuck up to the warehouse. There was a small window high up on the wall. I found some crates nearby and stacked them up so I could reach it. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. The warehouse was full of ivory tusks. Hundreds of them piled high. Each one represented a dead elephant, a life cut short by greed. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. I had to get evidence to take back to Mr. Ose. But just as I was about to climb down, I heard a shout. "Hey! What are you doing up there?" I looked down to see two men running towards me. My heart pounding, I jumped down and ran as fast as I could. I could hear them chasing me, their footsteps getting closer. I ran through dark alleys, jumping over trash cans, trying to lose them. Finally, after what seemed like hours, I couldn't hear them anymore. I slowed down, gasping for breath. I had escaped, but now they knew someone was onto them. I returned to my hotel, packed my things, and checked out immediately. It wasn't safe for me to stay there anymore. For the next few days, I moved from place to place, never staying anywhere for long. I was always looking over my shoulder, afraid I'd see the men from the warehouse. But I knew I couldn't leave yet. I had the pictures, but it wasn't enough. I needed to find out who was behind all this. A week later, I got my big break. I was sitting in a park, trying to figure out my next move, when I saw a familiar face. It was one of the men from the cafe, the ones I had followed to the warehouse. He was talking on his phone, looking angry. As he passed me, I heard him say, "Mr. Cohn wants the shipment tonight. No excuses. Mr. Cohn." Finally, I had a name. But who was he? I spent the rest of the day asking around, carefully. I learned that Mr. Cohn was a businessman, very rich and powerful. He owned several companies in the city. That night, I went to Mr. Cohn's office building. It was tall and shiny, with security guards at the entrance. I knew I couldn't just walk in. I waited and watched. After a few hours, I saw a group of men arrive. They were carrying large, heavy-looking boxes. My heart raced. Could it be the ivory? I followed them as they went around to the back of the building. There was a loading dock there, hidden from the street. I crept closer, hiding behind some trash cans. I could hear the men talking as they unloaded the boxes. "Careful with those," one man said. "Mr. Cohn will have our heads if anything happens to his ivory." I had my proof. I took out my phone and started recording. I captured everything, the men, the boxes, their conversation. But just as I thought I had everything I needed, something went wrong. My phone made a noise, a message alert I had forgotten to silence. The men stopped talking. "What was that?" one of them said. I knew I had to run. But as I turned to leave, I knocked over one of the trash cans. The noise echoed in the quiet night. There. Behind the trash cans. I ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. I could hear them pursuing me, their footsteps getting closer. I ran through the streets, my lungs burning. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to escape. Finally, after minutes of running, I couldn't hear them anymore. I slowed down, gasping for breath. I had escaped, but I knew I couldn't stay in the city any longer. It was time to go home. The journey back was a blur. I was always looking over my shoulder, afraid that Mr. Cohn's men had followed me. When I finally reached the national park, I felt like I could breathe again. I went straight to Mr. Ose's office. "Kamathi," he said when he saw me. "We were so worried. Did you find anything?" I nodded and took out my phone. "I have everything we need," I said. "Pictures, videos, names. We can stop them now." Mr. Ose looked at the evidence, his eyes wide. "This is incredible, Kamathi," he said. "You've done a great thing. With this, we can go to the authorities. We can stop the ivory trade." In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The police raided Mr. Cohn's businesses. They found not just ivory but other illegal goods, too. Mr. Cohn and many others were arrested. The news spread quickly, and other countries started cracking down on ivory smuggling, too. It wasn't the end of poaching, but it was a big step in the right direction. As for me, I went back to my job as a park ranger. But things are different now. The other rangers looked at me with respect. The elephants seemed safer. One day, while doing my rounds, I saw a herd of elephants by the river. Among them was a young calf playing in the water. As I watched, the calf's mother gently guided it with her trunk. Both of them had their tusks intact, gleaming white in the sunlight. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. This was why I had taken that journey. This was what I had fought for. The elephant scream that had started it all still echoed in my memory. But now, watching the peaceful herd, I heard a different sound. The sound of hope, of a future where elephants could live without fear. My journey through the heart of Africa changed me. It showed me the darkness that exists in the world as well as the light of good people willing to fight for what's right. As I drove back to the ranger station, I made a promise to myself, I would keep fighting and protecting these magnificent animals. Every tusk left on an elephant is a victory. Every elephant saved is a step towards a better world. And who knows? Maybe one day, the only ivory tusks in the world will be the ones still attached to living, breeding elephants. That's a future worth fighting for.